I got more responses for the hot takes questions on this iteration than ever before, so let's jump into this XL episode of Snap Hot Takes. Constantly nerfing new cards is a problem. For example, someone could have saved up their tokens for so long to buy Nocturne while it was a 3/5 and very good, but then by the time they can buy her, she gets nerfed to 4 power, causing the player to question buying her. I think there's two things going on here. First of all, I do think Nocturne is no longer the creme de la creme of 3-drops, and that is, a reasonable critique to have. I also think that this is something that has been thrown into the highlight by recent decisions made by Second Dinner. And what I mean by that is, for the last 8 months, they basically haven't nerfed any new cards, and then in the most recent patch, they nerfed Arishem, they nerfed Athena, Cassandra Nova, and Nocturne. That is more cards in that patch that came out this year than have been nerfed the entirety of the rest of the year. But I also think that it's worth pointing out that they were very minor nudges in terms of what that is. It's just the nature of competitive Marvel Snap means that there is typically a better thing to be doing when you get nudged down, even by the minor amount. That's something like Nocturne or Athena saw, or Arishem, which remains elite. I think that there's not really necessarily a good way to navigate these kind of situations. Like, if you release the card and it's too weak and then you buff it late, people get mad at you because then they can't buy the card. But if you release the card and it's too strong and then you nerf it, people get mad at you because they bought the card. And so I don't really think there's a perfect solution. I think ultimately what they should do in situations like this is A, try to keep the cards playable and at least okay, which I think they've done pretty well at, and B, make sure that if a card is constantly seeing play in everything, it's not an incredibly frustrating and awful experience, right? I think a good example of a card that everyone is kind of happy seeing a bunch of play is Jeff. That's a card nobody complains about, despite it being at the top of the play rate charts basically every week, basically for the entire time it's been out. And no one is mad at it because it's just such an innocuous, good, reasonable thing to have in the game. And I think that that is the kind of thing they need to put more power into when they can. But right now, I don't really see a problem with them doing balance on those cards. It's just that it is sort of awful, I think, that after 8 months of not ever nerfing a new card, they nerf a couple new cards and suddenly people are like, they need to stop nerfing new cards again. And it's like, it feels a little bit like a no-win situation. So the second thing that I would do if I were Second Dinner is just ignore all of that and make what you think the correct balance changes are and let the economy figure itself out. Because I don't think that the balance and the economy should overlap much at all. Unfortunately, they do by the necessity of the system. But what you're describing is an economy problem, not a balance problem. The balance team should just balance the game, and the economy team should worry about, compensating people or whatever. Valkyrie should be a 4-drop. I actually think you can do this. I think a lot of the time people propose stuff like that. They're like, oh, that's ridiculous. But I see this and I'm like, you know what? Maybe that's not the worst thing ever. I think a couple months ago, I would have said that was the worst thing ever, and you definitely shouldn't do that. But I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world for there to be a second Shang-Chi in the game. The issue is that is what this would be, right? Like, effectively, 4-drop Valkyrie would be second Shang-Chi. And I guess the question is, do you really want that? Because I think a lot of the hot takes on this post, like, I would say probably a solid 10% of the engagement on the post where I solicited the hot takes was people complaining about Shang-Chi existing. And I think that you probably can't complain about Shang-Chi existing and also want 4-cost Valkyrie and say that those are two things you can think at the same time. Because that is what this card would be. It would be, I think, a more interesting Shang-Chi, which is good, right? Like, that would be a good thing. I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world, honestly. I think it would be like a Shang-Chi with more hooks. I think that would be fine. I would probably have to test it. Like, this is the kind of thing where it's like, I see it and off the cuff, I'm like, that's probably fine. And then, like, 4 people in my comments point out something really stupid you can do with it. But I don't really know if that's going to be a huge issue. I think, like, a lot of people, something people say about Shang-Chi a lot is that it should be symmetrical. And Valkyrie is, in effect, that symmetrical Shang-Chi. I don't really have an issue with moving her to 4. She might be a little bit too strong, and it might be the kind of effect you don't really want to be that strong. But maybe it works. Cerebro needs a buff. There are at least 34 locations that single-handedly ruin a Cerebro game plan, along with cards that affect power, like Hazmat and Scorpion, etc. As time passes, this archetype only gets more difficult to play because no other archetype has to deal with this issue. Here's my take on Cerebro, and I don't know if necessarily this might make some people mad. I apologize if it does. Cerebro is the perfect deck for a certain type of player who seeks novelty in deck building, but actually isn't that good, because Cerebro does an incredibly good job of mixing novelty and deck building restrictions with actually not having that much effort go into it, right? Like, it makes you feel like you're doing something special, but what you're really doing is looking at the cards that have a number on it and then taking the best ones of those and then putting them in a deck with Cerebro and Mystique. And then what you're doing is playing those cards and then playing Cerebro and Mystique. And it's actually, like, I think kind of a design genius big brain move from Second Dinner. Like, I don't think they intended it like this, because I don't think anyone is that smart. But if you can get a deck that gets, like, Johnny players' neurons firing without actually having to be that difficult to build or play, that's a huge win. That's, like, one of the biggest wins in the entire game. So I am sympathetic to the idea that Cerebro could use a buff. The issue is, I don't know what that buff could reasonably be, because if you give it +3, I don't think there's a single card that gains 3 power off of a trigger and hasn't been nerfed. I guess Red Hulk, except, yeah, like Red Hulk, that's kind of it. But it had to be nerfed into that state, so I'm not really sure that counts. But, like, Thena's been nerfed, Silver Surfer when it gave +3 was nerfed, Elsa Bloodstone when it gave +3 was nerfed, and Cerebro, if it gave +3, would be much better than all of those cards because it's hitting a bunch of stuff. I don't know what a buff to Cerebro could possibly look like without being very, very awkward. And I don't think there's a good way to do that, in part because of the ease of playing the deck. Because when you get past all of the, like, ooh, I'm playing off meta of Cerebro, it is fundamentally just a dumb stats deck. And when those dumb stats are too high, suddenly your off meta deck becomes very on meta and very annoying. You know we couldn't get this into one of these videos without a Galactus take, so here it is. The Galactus nerf, the one where they completely destroyed its playability. The Zabu nerf and Alioth nerfs were not necessary. I understand the viewpoint of letting other decks see play, but I never understood the it's creating a toxic meta from each of these cards' eras. So let's go through that and talk about what these decks were doing that many people would consider to be toxic. And I do think that, like, Marvel Snap players have a lower bar for what is toxic than any other players. Like, there are things in Yu-Gi-Oh!, in Magic, in Hearthstone even, that are infinitely more toxic than anything you'd see in Marvel Snap. And so I get there's, like, this sense from players of other games when they come over to Marvel Snap and they see the stuff you're talking about as toxic. They say stuff like, what are you talking about? That's baby stuff. That's what a baby would call toxic. Are you a bunch of babies? I was locked up in a room of Yubel first turn kill combos until I never even saw daylight. I didn't see the sun until I was already a man. They start sounding like Bane a little bit. But, like, that is kind of how it feels sometimes when people ask these questions. And I do think you have to remember that, like, this is a different player base, and also that this is a different game entirely. All of these cards had something in common, and that thing in common was they prevented your opponent from doing things, like taking any game actions. And in other games, that's not really a problem. That's, like, an accepted part of, like, some deck strategies, is saying, you know, I win, you lose, you can't do anything about this, you can't take any game actions. Like, that's kind of what Yu-Gi-Oh! Is all about, actually. But, like, there's just a much less tolerance for that in a game that is explicitly about the board. Like, Marvel Snap is about the board and about the numbers on the board, and that's what the game is about. And so, for that reason, you end up in a situation where it's like, okay, this is doing something that our player base and our game is uniquely vulnerable to. Whether that be Zabu allowing for old Spider-Man plus Absorbing Man, meaning you couldn't play on 2 out of the 3 locations on the final turn of the game. Super fun. Or Galactus destroying 2 out of 3 locations, so you can only play on 1 location on the final turn of the game. Super fun! Or Alioth completely obliterating every card you played on whatever location it ended up on. Super fun. Those are cards that were not only outliers on power, which they were, they were also outliers on how much it sucks to play against them. And I think the easiest way to get nerfed in Marvel Snap is to be a power outlier, a sucky gameplay outlier, and a play rate outlier. And all of those cards were all three of those things. It's not the deck you are playing that's keeping you from infinite, you are just bad at retreating. While that may be true, I think there is more to getting to infinite than just snapping and retreating. People like to think Marvel Snap is actually all about snapping and retreating, and I am living proof that it's not, because I suck at both of those things. I do not snap aggressively enough. I constantly stay in on bad games, and I'm still very high ranked because I have game skills that carried over from, like, I don't know, I was rank 1 on MTG Arena. I've been pretty good at Hearthstone before. Like, I am good at card games. And so even though I'm not very good at the snap mechanic, I am good enough at card games to still be pretty good at this one, right? And I think that like people think that these two skills are not related, and that's actually the issue, is that they are related. Your game skill ties into when you, like, part of the reason I know I'm bad at snapping is because I'll be in situations where I was like, I knew this and I still didn't snap because I was afraid of whatever. What my weakness is my fear, and then at the same time, my overconfidence in terms of, you know, I'm a streamer, I'll stay, I'll just outskill them, it'll be fine, right? I think those are the things that are wrong with my game, if I had to, like, nail two of them down. But mostly, I don't think you need to be good at snapping and retreating to get to infinite. You could just be good at card games. You don't need to be particularly good at any of the aspects of Marvel Snap to get to infinite. And I realize people are going to be a little bit torn up by this, but, like, you can improve at those things. I was not born being good at card games. If you go back and you know my aliases, you can find posts of me being so mad on the MTG Salvation forums that I couldn't seem to win at, like, a Friday Night Magic level. Like, that's a casual event that I couldn't do well at. And I wasn't good at stuff until I put effort into getting good at stuff and had people help me get better at stuff. And this is not something that happens magically, but the honest answer is, like, if you're struggling getting to infinite, you're probably not just bad at snapping, you're probably bad at all the rest of the stuff in the game too. And that's fine. People aren't born good at stuff. It's not a reflection on you as a person. It's a reflection on the amount of effort you're willing to put in and the efficiency of that effort and where you're directing that effort. And for me, what ended up getting good at card games was, like, a process that took place over years. I started getting good at Hearthstone because there was a community of people who were able to help me improve. And when I left Hearthstone and started playing Magic, I joined the what is now the Jerry Thompson podcast Discord at the recommendation of a friend of mine, Yeoman5. Shout out to Yeoman. He's a great Magic brewer. And I got better and better and better thanks to the community there and the people who were willing to put in time to help me there. And I improved thanks to Jerry and Brian and many other people that I honestly can't name. But it's not linear and it's not easy. I cared a lot about that. Like, this was something that I let define me in my earlier years. And one of my big struggles now is trying to not let it define me, trying to be someone people watch for their personality as opposed to just the number up there. It's hard. And the point I'm making here is there's no shame in being bad at a card game. Like, I think the sooner you can accept I'm struggling to make it to infinite, I'm probably not that good, the better you'll be able to take that and say, how do I get better? And if you get stuck in I'm good and I deserve to be there and everything, that's not going to help you get better. It's not going to alleviate the problem. New Loki is a worse design than the old one and a much worse card to play against. Ooh, I disagree with this one. It's probably stronger in Arishem, but it's neither a worse design nor worse to play against. The only thing that I would say could possibly make this argument make sense in terms of being worse to play against is I really do hate that it obviates Cassandra Nova as a counter to Arishem. But fundamentally, the issues with Loki are, like, to my mind, they're numbers issues or maybe a card draw issue. If this card was a 4/5, if this card was a 3/3, if this card didn't draw a card, all of this would probably not be the problem that it is. It would be a much more balanced card. And I think any of those changes would be something I'd be happy to see happen to this Loki. but I don't think it's a problem with the design. I think the design's actually like I like it more. It's a better design. It's cooler. The rest of what it is, like the fact that it's an incredibly efficient 3/5 body that draws a card and then also does this good thing, and then you look at Crystal and you're like, what the hell is this? Yeah, no, like, I think to me, this is a numbers issue on this card. Like, I think it could be a 3/2 or a 3/3. I think it could be a 4/5. Adding energy hurts it a lot. I think it might actually have to be like a 4/6 or a 4/7 because you get less draws when you do that, right? Or it could be like maybe 3/4, take the draw off or something like that. I think that would make sense as well. Like, all of this is to say, right now, it is a full package of like, has a draw, is a 3/5. You change any of those things, whether it has the draw, the numbers on there, the 3 or the 5, you change those. I think the card ends up becoming more balanced. The one problematic interaction that I really do think might be an issue for this card is specifically obviating Cassandra Nova in Arishem. I don't like that it plays offense and defense so well. That's a frustrating thing for me. But I have enjoyed just like playing random Loki decks. I realize that's not for everyone, but like, I don't know if this is a hot take or not. I have very few complaints about this meta that aren't related to like clogged decks, honestly. Refund everyone's 6k tokens for Arishem and make it a separate queue for playing like Hearthstone's Tavern Brawl. No, don't do this. The Arishem is cool. I don't know why everyone is so obsessed with like, okay, this card is like, you know, how much better do people think Arishem is than other decks? Like that's the disconnect for me. Because for me, I look at Arishem and I'm like, all right, this is like 10, 15% better than like whatever other deck I'm playing, right? And to me, when I look at that, I'm like, all right, that's solvable. Just make it 10% worse. And then it'll be like a normal deck. And it's like, oh no, everyone's just like, no, Arishem is 50% better. And I think that's sort of the disconnect when it comes to people talking about Arishem, is I tend to think he's a little bit better than some other decks, and other people think he is way better than some other decks. But I wouldn't be surprised if, honestly, a lot of that is driven by when Arishem gets its good draws, it is so much better. And when Arishem gets its bad draws, it is very medium. And so people remember getting absolutely run over. They remember the turn 1 snap, turn 2 Lokis. They remember like the high rolls with Arishem. There is such a delta between the high rolls, which are very high, and the low rolls, which are usually the Arishem player like slinks out of there after playing no cards in their deck and just generally being sad. But that is sort of, I think, the issue people would have with this, where like this is a deck sort of reminiscent of old Thanos, where it has a very snappable nut draw, and then when it doesn't have a nut draw, it doesn't lose. It has the sort of cube profile of a Mr. Negative deck, where it's just like you just instantly snap whenever you're doing the thing that's really broken. But then when you aren't doing the thing that's really broken, instead of totally falling apart, you still get to play a game of Marvel Snap, and your opponent is a little bit afraid to snap into you. Also, I do think people are a little too afraid to snap into Arishem right now. Like, there are situations where it's like, all right, I've got my Cassandra. Maybe I can copy my Cassandra or something, or bounce my Cassandra. I've got a Cassandra, I've got a Shang-Chi. I'm probably going to be fine. And, like, when you have a Cassandra and a Shang-Chi, usually those are the situations where, like, I'm snapping into Arishem. I do think there's, like, just a degree of fear around the card that is making it better. But also, I will say, like, specifically Loki obviating the weaknesses, it's bad. I love talking about combos and theoretical plays, but overall in experience, it feels like you're less likely to see your ideal play than you are to see it, and sometimes that's lost in YouTube highlight content. There's a lot of RNG in this game, don't get mad when you lose to it. I agree, but again, I actually think there's probably less RNG in Marvel Snap than people give it credit for. People love complaining about, like, RNG because whenever there's visible RNG, the real thing, I think part of the genius of having visible RNG in a game, and it's not just that different games, different matchups play out differently and all of that. It's that everyone has a built-in excuse. I was playing yesterday, and I probably made some mistakes, but I didn't notice those mistakes because I got location screwed. I just got super unlucky. I got a bunch of bad matchups, you know? There's RNG in everything, but one of the genius things about a game is it gives people something to blame that isn't themselves. And I think if we were all more honest with ourselves, we probably wouldn't be playing games like this as much as we could. So I do think there's less RNG in Snap than there are in probably both Hearthstone and Magic due to 12-card decks. I also think that because of that, the Snap community has a worse understanding of RNG because it's mostly composed of people who have never played those games. And so when you're coming from a game like a game where it's purely about you, the player, like, I don't know, an Elden Ring or something, right? Where RNG does not have like a major presence, and then you come to a game like this where winning and losing can be dependent on the cards you draw, you're like, what the hell is this? There's so much RNG in here. But compared to its cohorts in the genre, I don't really think that's true. And I think the Snap community in general does this thing. They're like, I see a lot more. I guess I wouldn't know exactly. I've streamed Magic before, but not on the same scale. So my impression of the Snap community is there's a lot more like, I played 7 games of this and went 3 and 4, and therefore it's bad, without really understanding that that's not really representative of anything. And I do think that like maybe we're a little bit worse at understanding what RNG is than other TCG communities maybe. My only hot take is that having not touched the game for 3 months, the Snapshot is somehow even more entertaining. The Snapshot, for those who are unaware, is my Marvel Snap podcast I do with Brendan APG, famous, legendary Flesh and Blood phenom. And we talk about Marvel Snap, but also I think one of the things we do better than any other Marvel Snap podcast is we don't talk about Marvel Snap. So if you're interested in Marvel Snap adjacent, just having fun, it would be a good thing to check out. We also do talk about Marvel Snap. It's like my most free-flowing platform, which I feel like is insane because I'm very free-flowing on YouTube, but on the podcast, I am like 100% uncensored, which actually kind of makes me sound like I'm doing like one of those like, I'm being canceled by the woke left, 100% uncensored podcast. But that's not really the vibe I'm going for. It just does sound like that. The imbalance patch should not only be brought back, it should be made permanent. Something should happen when you play out the Fantastic Four or a bunch of Spider People or Avengers. I agree with you. I don't think they're going to do this, but it's clearly something that people are interested in, and I think it would be good if there were things that actually rewarded you for doing this. Playing typal decks is so common across other games. You have like goblin decks in Magic, like things where the type of card you put in your deck matters. I know Ben Bro did a video way early in the game's release where he was like, we don't have creature types, we just have one type of creature and it's characters from the Marvel Universe. With all due respect to Ben Bro, I think the game may have outgrown that. Deadpool's Diner was the best new mode since launch. It should be always available, maybe not always with a free card as rewards. Borders, variants, and bubs would work great for rewards. I kind of agree that Deadpool's Diner should be always available, but what I think they should do is sort of iterate on it. Like, take it back in the lab for a bit, come out with a game mode that's actually a game mode, right? That isn't just ladder with extra steps, and then we'll be talking. Because I do think there should, like, Deadpool's Diner was super cool. I think it probably brought a bunch of new players into the game, and I think that's a good thing. And Deadpool's Diner doing that is something they'd like to replicate, but how much of that is because it's special? And how much of that is because it's fun? My instinct is that Deadpool's Diner, if it brought players into the game, did so because it was special and new card and movie tie-in. You don't want to make it less special. You do want to make it more fun. So do other game modes. Find out something that makes Deadpool's Diner unique and make it different. And then we might be in the realm of this could be the kind of thing that stays in the game for a while. Active tournament scene organization / support is something that's missing from Snap to take it to the next level as a card game. I don't think they want it, and it's hard for me to argue. I think that the only thing the tournament scene really needs is spectator mode, but it's sort of hard for me to look at what they do and say that their strategy hasn't been a success. As I understand it, there are about 7 or 8 games, free-to-play live service games released in the last 5 years by Western developers that have been in any way successful, and Marvel Snap is one of those games. And I think that when we talk about Marvel Snap as a game, we tend to talk about it as if it's like some sort of like small indie nothing game, when there are multiple 100k plus YouTubers who made their bones off of this game entirely, basically. And I think that like that is it, like it's small relative to the biggest games in the world, but I think it's sort of an undeniable success, especially for the first game by a studio. And so when you talk about it like it's failing or like it will fail if not X or like things like that, I tend to think that sort of is the wrong perspective to come at it from. When I look at something like we could do competitive mode better, I think about like, well, why do they want that? I don't think they want that. I think they want their top Marvel Snap creators, the faces of Marvel Snap, to be people like Cozy and Dexter, who are not sweating about this, who are not losing their mind, who are not me. Like, they don't want someone like me who is losing his mind whenever he loses 2 ranks to be the face of the game. Why would you? That's not fun. You want someone who is having fun. You want your game to be about having fun. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that like the biggest creators in Marvel Snap are the people who have fun when they play. Like, that's like I think competitive scenes tend to drive net fun down, honestly. And the more Marvel Snap can stay in this honeymoon period where the biggest creators in the game are people who are having fun and doing things for fun and not just posting, hey, this deck has like an 80% win rate on untapped.gg, it must be busted. The more people can do that, the better off it is, I think. Like, obviously, there are players who were able to bridge that very well. I think, like, in Hearthstone, like, Disguised Toast is a great example. Dog is a great example. Like, players who were able to do both of those things at the same time. But I think that it is just a good thing generally that Marvel Snap is not focused overly on competitive for the game's growth. Maybe at some point it'll be a competitive game, but it doesn't need to be successful, and it already is successful without that. Current Loki and Arishem take away the skill from the snap mechanic. Usually, when an opponent plays Loki and Arishem, there's a specific card that beats you. Odds are they don't have it, and it creates a situation where you win 4 and lose 8, punishing for good snapping. This is so true. I lost 8 cubes yesterday because I was playing an Annihilus deck. Someone Loki'd me. I played around the Annihilus. They did not have it, and if I just dumped power instead of playing around the Annihilus, I would have won the game. It's tough, right? Like, choosing what to play around, what not to play around, it is kind of a numbers game, and the fact that you can't really get a read on your opponents consistently, like, my thought process was, they would never stay here if they didn't have the Annihilus. Nobody would stay in this game that they only win if they have Annihilus if they didn't have the Annihilus. And so I played to beat the Annihilus, and then I lost because they did stay, even though they couldn't have won if I'd played to beat non-Annihilus. And it's like, maybe they were thinking, well, he doesn't know I don't have the Annihilus, so he's going to play, and it's just, it's awkward. I don't think that necessarily takes the skill out of it, but it does create these situations where it's like fundamentally unknowable. You're basically just playing a guessing game, and you just have to pick. My hot take is that hot takes are your best and most underrated videos. I love that you re-educate off-the-road conceptions about the game. That's just a fun way to phrase it. I'm doing a re-education camp for, like, people who have bad takes. I'm running for president on the platform of if you have a bad take on Twitter, you have to listen to me yell at you about it for 5 minutes. There should be 0 cards that are active if they have not been played. High Evo is the worst, but Agatha, Uatu, Arishem, all of them should have to be played to be activated. If they don't have to be played, the only reason they have a cost is a trigger for other cards. I think this is a really bad take, because I think that it not explicitly saying, hey, we could do a cool thing with these designs, and then not doing that seems sucky. I think cards like High Evo and Arishem are like some of the best, most popular, most interesting cards in the game, because they unlock different styles of deck building, and deck building is a big part of the game. And so I think that when you look at how these cards tend to be received, it tends to be actually very well. And so I actually think they should probably do more of this, because it changes the dynamics of the game, and making the game all about just what is on the board as opposed to what choices you made in deck building, providing people different experiences, because Marvel Snap is such, there's only 12 cards, right? So I think using the space of cards that are enabling an effect across the whole deck has consistently produced some of the most popular, enduring Marvel Snap cards in the entire game. High Evolutionary, Thanos, Arishem, Loki, incredibly popular, incredibly powerful at different times. Very, very fun and unique. I think some of the best experiences in Marvel Snap have been because of those cards. I guess Loki doesn't count, but, you know, it kind of does when you talk about like cards that change your deck building. But at least 3 of those count. Playing Marvel Snap feels bad. The only way to win is to be meta or counter meta. And using homebrew decks feels bad because they never really win, but using meta relevant makes your deck easily predictable, which also feels bad. All right, I don't really know a better way to say this, but that's a you problem. Yeah, the best way to win games of Marvel Snap is play the decks that have a proven pedigree for winning games of Marvel Snap. That seems really straightforward and not a thing to complain about. You shouldn't be able to win against someone who's trying to win if you're not trying to win. And guess what? Trying to win includes deck selection. And so it's like, what you're effectively complaining about is the fact that you aren't collecting free wins against people who are trying harder than you because you're not trying. You shouldn't be able to collect free wins against people who are trying harder than you because you're not trying. They're trying harder than you. Like, that's what the meta is. The meta isn't just like this random thing that sprouts up out of nowhere. People play those decks because they work. It's not just like a content creator says this deck is good and then everyone plays it, and then despite the fact that they have a 45% win rate, they just keep on playing it because the content creator said the deck was good. The content creator said the deck was good. People play it works, and then they keep playing it. The season is slow and lame so far. Its cards aren't bringing anything new to the mix, just upgrades to existing archetypes that can play without them completely. The drought from Deadpool Diner is real. With nothing else to fill the void, feels bad. Second part of this, probably true. We covered that a little bit earlier. First part of this, I'm just not sure what people want. Like, it feels like there's no possible way for Second Dinner to make any kind of card without someone being mad about it. If the card is too strong, people will complain that it is too strong. If the card is too weak, people will complain that it is too weak. If it is too weak and they buff it, they will complain that they buffed it too late. If it is too strong and they nerf it, they will complain that they nerfed it and that they already spent money on it. If it is a card that buffs an existing archetype, they will complain that it doesn't create a new archetype. If it's a card that creates a new archetype, they will say, why didn't you buff the existing archetype? I don't think it's all one person. Like, these are different contingents of the Marvel Snap economy, but like, people think different things about Marvel Snap cards, and sometimes the card is for a person who has a different opinion on this than you, I think. I think there are too many cards that are teetering the unplayable line. Speed is my best example. 3/3 +1, if you spend all energy, is too weak, but +2 is probably too busted. There's too many cards in every energy slot that overshadow too many other cards. Overshadow how? Like, what I want to talk about here specifically is, I think that's way more true the earlier into the curve you are. And I think a lot of that is because it is hard to differentiate a 1-drop, a 2-drop, a 3-drop from the other 1s, 2s, and 3s. Because you can't put these incredibly impactful effects on 1s, 2s, and 3s. You can put pretty good effects on 1s, 2s, and 3s, but you can't put game-defining effects on them, because when you do that, they're broken. And so when you put like these incredibly game-defining, busted effects on 1s, 2s, and 3s, they're like always creating meta decks. They're always incredibly strong. They're always things that really, really matter. Angela, Athena, Kitty Pryde, Elsa Bloodstone, Silver Surfer. And so when you go out of your way and you're like, all right, what if we just want to make a good card? What if we just want to make, like, Speed is probably like a pretty good card. My worry for Speed is mostly that he doesn't outcompete Cassandra Nova Copycat Loki right now. But that's not necessarily always going to be true. And like, I think he's like just a pretty good card. And so you end up in a situation where it's like, we probably want to be able to make good cards. Like, that's probably something that you want the company to be able to do, is be like, well, what if we just want to make a good card? What if we just like, this is a good card. Let's make a good card. Let's make a card that isn't like super busted. I think that's harder to do down low on the curve, because on the curve down low, a lot of the things that tend to get played the most are just the best cards at every energy slot by like ratio of output to energy, right? Jeff and Kate Bishop and things like Loki and things like, you know, previously Nocturne, Cassandra Nova, Copycat. Like, they aren't things that really hook into your deck's game plan a lot of the time. It's just like you're looking for the best possible output from those slots. And then later on in the curve is where the things that really define your deck are, because they have more room to design those cards in that space, because there's more things you can do with a 5-drop than there are with a 2 or 3. Jeff Week should give everyone Jeff if they don't have him. I agree, but I'm not shocked they didn't do this, right? Like, giving away a free Series 5 card, I get it, right? I get why you wouldn't do that. Yes, I wanted them to do it, though. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, it's the worst thing in the world they didn't do it, but I did want them to do it, and even though I understand why it's probably not a financially feasible decision, I still wanted them to do it. Snap is a game for old people. Factually true. I checked my YouTube demographics in preparation for this. The majority of my audience is like 25 plus, and I think probably more than half is 30 plus. We don't get it like that exactly split, but if I had to guess, I would say there's a lot of 30-year-old boomers in this here watching this video. Game for old people. Content creators post a video about a powerful deck. Everyone starts playing that deck. Everyone gets sick of playing against the deck. Creator trash talks deck until it gets nerfed. Rinse and repeat. This is like basically magical thinking. This is putting the cause of something as if it is because of the content creator and not because the deck is powerful. If I tell people to play a deck and the deck ends up sucking, they stop playing the deck. Like, this is super basic to me. If Cozy makes a video and 100,000 people watch that video and they play the deck and then they have a collective 40% win rate, they're gonna stop playing the deck. When people make content about, like you even said it, about a powerful deck, that's the thing. The deck being good is the thing that's like that. You even said it. Like, about a powerful deck. The deck is powerful. It's not my fault. There's no like group psychosis theory of the metagame here. Like, the idea that people are just gonna like keep playing a deck that is losing for them instead of what they actually do, which is lose 2 games, show up in my comments and call me a loser. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous thing. People don't keep playing things when the game is saying actually stop, which is what happens when you lose, because you see the number going down, you're like, this sucks, Cam doesn't know what he's talking about. That's what actually happens. And so the idea that it's like, content creator, they make the deck good, and then they try to get it nerfed, it's like, no, it's good because it's powerful, and sometimes powerful things are too powerful, and then when they're too powerful, people complain about them. Off topic, but anyone complaining about Deadpool Diner being hard and failed to get cast are very low-skilled players. Any normal players worth their salt should be able to get her quite easily with a bit of playtime. Here's the thing. I think this is true, and it's why Deadpool's Diner it's the worst thing about Deadpool's Diner to me. Because, like, yes, it's true. A normal player worth their salt should be able to get Deadpool's Diner, should be able to get Cassandra Nova. But here's the other thing. That's stupid. I don't need Cassandra Nova. Like, I could buy her. I don't, like, the fact that the card is gated behind skill at all is stupid, because the people that need her the most are the people who are least likely to get her. And that sucks. And that's the exact opposite of the incentives you want. So, like, instead of talking about people and being like, oh, they're actually just bad because they can't get Cassandra Nova, understand that, like, those are the people who need her the most. The people who need this new card the most, the card that is the best card in the game against the best deck in the game, are the people who probably don't have access to Arishem. And so they need it more than me. They need it the most. The people for whom this game mode was easy are not the people who need a free card. The people for whom this game mode is hard are the people who need a free card. That's the opposite of the way it should be. Change Aero from a 5/8 to a 5/5 and make her move all cards played to her location. Disrupt movement would be played so much more. Do this. I want this. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I did everything I could to get more takes in this episode. So we have like a shorter kind of video, like a shorter amount devoted to each of these takes than normally. There's no like 5-10 minute rants in here, I hope. But we do have like 23 whole takes in this episode. So an average of about like a little under 2 minutes on each, which I'm really hopeful. Maybe you guys like this more. Maybe you guys like this less. Maybe it's like, here's the thing. Since Snap is so like old people demo, I don't know if I'm supposed to do like millennial TikTok, let's talk about everything super fast, or if people actually like me talking about like stuff for 10 minutes at a time. Let me know in the comments if you liked this version of the hot takes, if you liked the previous versions of the hot takes, and if you noticed no difference. Thank you so much.